Pinocchio has been translated into more languages than almost any book in human history, more than Shakespeare, more than the Bible in some regions. But here's what nobody tells you. The original story ended with the puppet dead, hanged, abandoned, gone. And it stayed that way until thousands of children refused to accept it. They brought him back. So the real question isn't whether a wooden boy can become human. The real question is, what kind of story refuses to die, no matter how many times you try to end it? Most legends are born slowly. Pinocchio was born on a Tuesday. On that day, in the first issue of Italy's first children's newspaper, a story began. Not with magic, not with wonder, but with a piece of wood that screamed. A carpenter named Geppetto received a log, a simple log, and the moment his blade touched it, the wood cried out in pain. "Stop! You're hurting me!" The carpenter looked around. No one was there. Just the wood, just him. Just the silence of a cold room where a man with nothing was trying to carve something from whatever he had left. In every adaptation that followed, the stage plays, the cartoons, the Hollywood films, that opening moment was quietly erased. The screaming wood, the log that felt pain before it had a face. The suffering came first. Everything else came after. Why was that removed? Because it changes everything. If the wood was already alive before Geppetto shaped it, then Pinocchio was not created. He was released. Not a father's dream given form, a prisoner finally given a body to escape with. And something imprisoned inside silence and darkness for that long does not walk out grateful. It walks out hungry. It walks out with no understanding of the rules, because where it came from, there were no rules. Only the grain of the wood, only the dark. The man who created Pinocchio used a false name. His real name was Carlo Lorenzini. He published under the name Collodi, borrowed from a small hill town where he spent years of his childhood, sent away from Florence because his family could not afford to keep all their children together. He had been, in some sense, given away. And now, decades later, this same man was writing a story about a father who built a son from wood because he had no other way of having one. Because real children were out of reach. A man who was sent away as a boy, writing about a boy carved into existence by a man with nothing. The abandonment runs in both directions. The child who lost his family, the father who never had one. Lorenzini had fought in 2 wars before he ever wrote this story. He had believed in revolution, in liberation, in the idea that Italy could become something fair and honest. He risked his life for that idea, then watched the politicians take everything. He spent 30 years writing political satire, sharp words aimed at the corrupt and the hypocritical, the powerful men who promised change and delivered only more darkness in a different coat. 30 years, and nothing moved. By 1881, he was 55 years old, tired in a way that goes deeper than the body. So he gave up on his own generation entirely and turned to children instead. Not because he believed children were pure or magical, because they were the only audience still open to the possibility that things could be different. The only ones who had not yet decided the world was permanently fixed. The puppet was his last argument, not for adults, for the ones who came after. Here is something almost never mentioned in the popular telling of this story. The puppet, the wooden figure moved by invisible hands, is not a 19th century invention. It is one of the oldest symbols in human mythological history. Across cultures and centuries, the animated figure that mimics human movement but is not quite human has appeared again and again. And always it carries the same dark question. Who is actually in control? In ancient Greek myth, the god Hephaestus built golden figures in his forge, automatons, self-moving forms that could walk and think. They were not human, but they were not simply tools either. They existed in the uncomfortable space between. In medieval Europe, the marionette walked the line between sacred and profane. Used first in religious pageants, it gradually drifted into darker performances. The puppet could mock the bishop, curse the landlord, speak the unspeakable, because if anyone objected, the puppeteer could simply shrug. It wasn't me, it was the puppet. The puppet has always been a way of saying dangerous things through a mouth that officially does not exist. In Japan, the bunraku tradition requires 3 puppeteers operating one figure in complete silence. One controls the head and right arm, one the left arm, one the legs. Audiences stop seeing the operators within minutes. They see only the figure. They feel only what the figure feels. The illusion is total. But the control is also total. This is the archetype beneath every puppet story ever told. A being that appears to act freely, that suffers and chooses and loves, but whose every movement is determined by hands it cannot see and will never name. Collodi placed his country inside that archetype and asked his readers to recognize themselves. Now. The nose. Everyone knows about the nose. It has become a global shorthand for dishonesty, a rating scale for politicians, a symbol recognized on every continent without explanation. But here is what almost no one knows. In the original text, the nose grows twice, only twice in the entire book, and in scenes where the puppet lies directly, clearly, without ambiguity, nothing happens to his nose at all. It stays exactly the same length. The lie passes. No elongation, no consequence. So the nose was never about lying to others. Look carefully at the 2 moments where it actually grows. In both cases, Pinocchio is not deceiving another character. He is deceiving himself, insisting that everything is fine, that he is not afraid, that he does not need help, when in reality he is lost and starving and alone. The nose grows toward the thing he is refusing to look at. This is not a lesson about honesty. This is a description of a psychological mechanism, the way a person in pain builds a version of reality that makes the pain survivable, and how that constructed version eventually becomes visible to everyone except the person living inside it. The body always knows, and eventually, the body tells. Pinocchio never feels his nose grow. He discovers it only when someone reacts, or when it strikes something solid in the world he was pretending was not there. In October of 1881, Collodi killed his puppet. No warning, no farewell. Pinocchio was hanged from an oak tree by 2 figures in the dark, and the chapter ended, and the newspaper moved to the next page, and that was that. The author was finished, but the readers were not. Letters arrived at the newspaper in quantities that overwhelmed the staff. Not fan mail, not polite requests, something raw. Children and parents writing in genuine distress, refusing the ending, demanding the puppet back. These were not wealthy readers with leisure and full stomachs. These were people living in the exact conditions the story described: poverty, exhaustion, survival in a country that had promised everything and delivered almost nothing. They had very little, and they had decided that this wooden puppet was one of the things worth holding on to. 4 months after his execution, Pinocchio opened his eyes. Collodi returned, wrote 19 more chapters, gave the puppet a different ending, not death on a tree, but transformation. A humanity earned through sacrifice, not magic. The readers had rewritten the story simply by refusing to let it end. In mythology, that is called resurrection. In psychology, it is called collective projection, a community placing its survival instinct inside a symbol and defending that symbol as though life itself depends on it. In horror, we use a simpler phrase: We call it the thing that cannot stay buried. Carlo Lorenzini died in 1890, before the translations, before the global fame, before the films and the asteroid and the philosophical paradoxes bearing his puppet's name. He died believing he had written something minor. He was wrong. Pinocchio is still walking, not on a stage, not on a screen, in the places we do not look at directly, in the versions of ourselves we maintain when the real version is too heavy to carry, in the strings we follow without seeing them, in the lies that are not lies to other people, only to the face in the mirror each morning. The wood does not rot easily, and the strings were never visible to begin with.